Dr. Miles, thank you for that rousing introduction. And she said something in which I want to start with that. I want to start with history, because we should never forget history. When you look back, you learn so much from what has happened. And I want to go way back, and this is not going to be a long, drawn-out lecture, but I want to put something in perspective. 1492, that's how far I'm going back.
Wow.
1492. Christopher Columbus is about to take a voyage to Asia. Back then, there were two views. One view was that the world was flat. The other view was that the world was round. Christopher Columbus believed that the world was round. But back then, the persons who believed that the world was round was in a minority. And not only that they were in a minority, they had no clue as to how big the world was. So Christopher Columbus decided to voyage to Asia, because they didn't want to go around the Cape of Good Hope, and the Ottoman Empire had controlled that route through Egypt and what have you. So they couldn't go that way, it was too dangerous. So Christopher Columbus decided that he wanted to go to another side to get to Asia. So he started his voyage, and he ended up in the Bahamas. Back then, Europe thought that the world consisted of Asia, Africa, and Europe. That was it. They had no concept that there was a Pacific Ocean. And Christopher came and, in quotation, discovered. So he came and discovered, and he was very disappointed, because what he came here for was spice and gold and all that kind of a thing, because he thought he was in Asia. Realized that wasn't the case, and by 1506 he died, disappointed, not knowing though the door that he had opened. He opened the door to a new economic reality called mercantilism, in which there were wars fought, people killed, West Indies traded for Canada, and all those kind of things, because at the time, the small West Indies was so powerful versus what we now know of what is Canada. All right, so as not to bore you, let's fast forward to 2000. 510 years later, thereabouts. And in 2005, Thomas Friedman declared, ironically, that the world was flat. So we're coming full circle. We're coming from their believing that, listen, the world was round, at least for the persons who knew, the educated people, to coming back to thinking that the world is now flat. And why are we saying that the world is flat? The flat world refers to changes and progress that has been generated through the use of ICT, or digital technologies, which includes computer hardware, software, and networks at their core. So if I go back to Christopher Columbus a little bit, Christopher, after he found the New World, and he thought that, well, boy, listen, this is not it. Underestimating just how powerful of a discovery, and again in quotation marks, that he made. Didn't realize just how much he had done by just coming, because it facilitated trade. It facilitated genocide too, but it facilitated trade. And for a time, what it did was to increase wealth in particular countries. So in 2005, so I'm back to current, to this century, Thomas Friedman said that, listen, the world was flat. And he thought that, well, boy, listen, The world is going to be transformed by information and communications technology. And I want to suggest to you that he also has underestimated just how powerful this new paradigm that is coming into being will be. And the working hypothesis this evening will be that this new paradigm, we must be an integral part of this new paradigm. And I'm also suggesting that it's the first time in our history that there is a new paradigm that will be taking place in the world, and we as a country will have control over the decisions that we make. Because in the 60s and even before that, we had no control over what we did. So, the rate, scope, and depth and disruption caused by the growth of ICT would suggest that Friedman underestimated the transformative power of the technology. We are now living in an era where knowledge, product, manufacturing, love, sex, and virtually everything it seems can be digitized. So ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Digital Life. And we're going to go through this whole aspect of what we call digital life, and we'll look at how have we gotten to this point. Forgive me for going to and fro, all right, guys? So a while ago I was at 2005, and now going back to 1997, all right? A significant event happened in 1997. International event. What happened in 1997 is that there was this general agreement in trade and services called GATS. And what it did was all of the companies, the telecommunication companies that were monopolies, they had to be broken up. And as a result of that, what has happened is that there is this tremendous growth in the use of ICT because of this one seminal event in 1997. As a result of this event, Jamaica started the process of liberalization of the telecommunications sector in 2000. And by 2003, we had completed that liberalization. We were the first country in the English-speaking Caribbean to liberalize our telecommunications sector. And what I'm suggesting here is that telecommunications is the route to this digital life that we are now experiencing. And that's why that event in 1997 was so seminal. Just looking at some data here, in 2006, this is 6 years after liberalization, only 29% of Jamaicans use the internet. What were they using it for? Information, primarily, email, chat. By 2004, this changed. Information went down to 17%. Social media, which wasn't even around then, moved to 36%, leisure 26%. So there has been some changes that has taken place in the sector as a result of this liberalization. But let me look a little bit closer to what digital life is all about. And I want to put this in a perspective in which we can even understand some of the international issues that are taking place, all right? Downs in 2009 described digital life this way. Downs looked at three things: Moore's law, Metcalfe's law, and the law of disruption. And even though this is all theoretical and sound like too much academic stuff, I'm going to do it in a way and it's not boring, all right? So let's look at Moore's law. Moore's law said this: computers, every 12 to 18 months, the processing power of computers will double while the price will more or less hold constant. This was from 1965 that Moore said this. This has not changed. All right? What has happened over the period up to now is that the big computers that used to be in rooms are now in your pockets. All right? Easily fit in your pocket. I'm not just easily fit in your pocket, but more powerful now than those big computers that used to be in a room. All right? So this has continued. So what has happened is that computers have become smaller, cheaper, and it's the same thing with data storage. You used to see people walking around with big reams of stuff. Now you have a little jump drive or whatever else with an awful lot of data. You have a phone that you can listen to music for years and never listen to it to one song for a second time because you have so much storage. So that's the first law. And at least you can relate to this law, right? Mm-hmm. The second law that he talks about is Metcalfe's law, in which he says that, let me simplify this. The more person who is on a network, the more valuable that network becomes. All right? Look at Facebook. Facebook has 2 billion people on. Facebook is very valuable because of the number of persons who are on that network. So the more persons you have on a network, and that's why Facebook is saying, okay, I'm giving you all this for free. It's not really free because they're using you. As a colleague of mine who is here often say, if it's free, it means that you are the product. All right? But that's what Metcalfe's law is saying. Now, let me put these two laws together, because what Metcalfe's law says that, listen, Moore's law says that, listen, faster, cheaper, right? Metcalfe's law says, listen, as a network grows, the more valuable that network becomes. Those two laws has created all kinds of virtualization in the world, all right? These two laws create a third law called the law of disruption, which says that technology changes exponentially, but social, economic, and legal systems change this incrementally. And we can relate to this, right? We see where all of these things are happening so fast, but the legal system just cannot keep up. The social system cannot keep up, right? And this leads to periodic upheavals which are unavoidable. And I dare say to you now that we are going through periodic upheavals. And what we see happening, for instance, with economic nationalism that is being trumpeted by by Donald, you said. And even Brexit, for instance, these are all responses to changes that are taking place in the society because of all that is happening with technology. It's not, listen, when I was growing up, it was BBC News at 8 o'clock. Some of you can relate to this, in which you would know what was going on in the world. Now, as it happened, before it happened, you are hearing about it, and even these other responses with fake news and all of these things are responses to the changes that is taking place because the technology is forcing these changes. Because it allows persons now to create their own news. Yes. And if you have a group of persons who thinks the same way as you, you can therefore feed them with whatever news. It doesn't have to be an established means. But all of this, what I'm saying, is as a result of these two laws. These three laws, really. And these disruptions we're seeing all around us, and some of them we're taking for granted because we are all here experiencing them. We're seeing 3D printing, in which, for instance, it is expected that you may be able to just print your own medication. So instead of going and buying tablets, and you have a 3D printer, prescription comes, you can therefore print it, take your tablet, and you're cool. There is the whole question of autonomous driving, and you can see how likely this is to be very, very disruptive. All right? What it means is, what we're seeing creeping in is that cars are parking themselves. Cars are driving themselves. Right? It means that persons who used to teach people to drive cannot work. That's what it means, right? What is also happening is that even warfare gets changed because of technology coming new technology coming into the fore. So you're seeing now what's coming out is autonomous warfare, in which there are drones that can make decisions, adapt on the fly, take 100 pictures of you, recognize you, even if you have on makeup and disguise, and kill you. No collateral damage. Professor Daciani is fine. Mercedes is fine. But these are some of the things that are happening. And like I say, because we're experiencing them in real time, we're not taking them very seriously. There is also the whole question of the second machine age. And again, I'm going to run through some of these slides very quickly. Because these changes are dichotomous in nature. They will bring benefits. But there are also going to be serious ethical and other disadvantages associated with these technologies coming to the fore. This lecture could have been titled The Internet of Things. But if I had put that, none of you wouldn't come. Maybe you'd still. But in 2008, 2009, something significant and somehow seemingly inconsequential happened. What happened in 2008, somewhere between 2008 and 2009, is that there were more machines on the internet than there were people. Now, why is this important? What it meant at that time is that we got to a stage in which machines now were communicating with each other more than people were communicating with each other. That inflection point that took place in 2008 is called the Internet of Things. For persons who are not in the technology era, this means nothing. But I'm going to show you just how important it is. And why, as a result of this, we have to become part of the internet age, because if we don't, we are going to remain poor. We have moved from a stage in which Bill Gates expected that there would be a computer on everybody's desk to a stage now in which it is expected that everybody is connected. I can assure you that everybody here is connected to a network right now. I dare anybody to raise their hand. Every single soul inside here is connected to a network. And what the Internet of Things is saying is that it's not just your regular devices that can therefore be connected to the network. It's everything else that can therefore connect to a network and can send and receive data. Everything. In fact, in 2012, the World Economic Forum declared that data was a new class of economic asset, similar to currency or gold. Data. What does Google trade in? What does Facebook trade in? Data. Facebook says, tell me everything about yourself. Tell me that you went to KC and which other primary school you went to and everything. Tell me everything So I know everything about you, and I'm therefore going to use that data to trade. That's exactly what it is. It has brought on a whole heap of other issues about privacy and all of that, but that's for another time. All this huge amount of data is termed big data. Big data has a very nebulous definition because we really don't know exactly what it is or is going to become yet. So the definitions, any definitions that you see is going to be deliberately nebulous because it is evolving, all right? But the data, all this data is coming from social networks, cell phones, credit cards, loyalty cards, health cards, traffic, energy systems, meter, all these things that we now have, which is data-driven. What this massive amount of data has created is what is called analytics. It means that you go on a website and they can tell you what you like, what other people like you liked, what you may like, create a profile of you, and do all these kinds of things. All right? This may take a little bit more time than I want, but I need to explain this to you. Just an example of how data is being used. Target supermarket in the United States wanted to increase sales. And they realized that there are certain things that happen in your life that changes your purchasing pattern. You get married, you change your purchasing pattern. You get divorced, you change your purchasing pattern. You have children, you change your purchasing pattern. And what they were targeting, what they wanted to know is when a woman is pregnant. But they wanted to know from early. They didn't want to know when she went and registered the child because they wanted to have a leg up. So they gave all their people loyalty cards and what have you. And they looked at the data and they wanted to find out what are the different behaviors that women exhibit at different stages of their pregnancy. What do they buy? What do they buy? And they needed to know, they needed to know what trimester you were in based on the data that they got from you. And they realized that, well, early in the pregnancy, you want unscented stuff, right? If I truncate this, basically what they found out was, listen, at particular points in your pregnancy, you shop for different things. All right? There's a time that you start shopping for vitamins and all of that, and you ladies know what these things are. All right? But they found this out. And what they did was to start sending coupons to persons early in the process based on where they thought where their pregnancy was. And this was the most interesting part of it. A father came to the Target store and wanted to know, why are you sending my daughter these coupons? And was upset and asked them not to send it back again. She's not having sex. Suffice to say that he went back and apologized. But understand this, guys, even though we may consider this a joke, it may be intrusive. All right? It is likely intrusive because what is happening is that persons are collecting data on you and knowing things about you that you may not want other people to know. But that's what is happening with data. So with all this data and the Internet of Things, it is causing a revolution in several areas. It's causing a revolution in industry. the way industry is now being set up, at least like the Germans and some others, is that they're putting sensors in everything so they know exactly what is happening at any point in time during the process, and the information can therefore be sent back and decision made in real time. So there's sensors on everything. So that is happening on the industry standpoint. And what it also means is that all this data can take you from the entire supply chain to destination, right? Meaning that to the consumer. So there's data that you can track all along the process. I'll leave out some of this. Agriculture is also changing. What you have now is precision farming, in which you have techniques in which the soil can be tested by a machine, determine the type of soil, make a decision as to what should be added to the soil, and so on along the way. Nowadays, if our farmers are going away for farm work, they need more than they used to do. They need to know more than they used to do. That has changed because technology has influenced now exactly how farming techniques go. You can tell, for instance, this disease is there, and it's not a human being that is checking it. It's a machine that is checking it and sending the data to and fro. Smart cities. Another big change that is taking place. Huawei is pushing smart cities. And smart cities have all kinds of aspects to it. All right? There's smart lighting, smart traffic, smart advertising, in which all of these things are connected. You are passing an ad, and because it's you passing the ad, a particular ad comes up. All right? Yes. Traffic can be redirected as a result of as to what is going on. You can have Wi-Fi all over the place now. So on your traffic light, you have Wi-Fi, and on that traffic light, not traffic light, on your light pole, right? And on that light pole, you may have a small advertising board which knows that is you passing because there's another device on you which identifies you, and therefore knows that these are the things that you like, and then the things come up. And you're seeing some of this already creeping in, you know. When you go online to buy something and you have asked for it, it then says, all of a sudden, you are looking for a hotel, and all of a sudden, all kinds of hotel coming up, right? So what we're saying is that, listen, that will be transferred to things around you, all right? We're also seeing what is called conversational commerce coming into being. Jack, Alexia, order me a pizza. Yes. Alexia is a device from Amazon, as you know, and Alexia will order your pizza because they may be connected to Pizza. And the order goes there, they know exactly where you are, and order is filled before you know it, somebody comes. And we may get to the point in which the order is sent to a 3D printer, and the printer brings pizza. And this is not far-fetched, you know, in which the printer prints the pizza for you, and there's no need for any delivery. I won't go into smart cities too much, no. This last one I just want to mention, because when I saw it, I'm saying, huh? This now is in health. Google has started this project called Calico, which means California Life Company. And its aim is to extend lifespan. What is being contemplated is this. Is that every 10 years or so, you go and get your checkup. And what we'll do is to look at all your tissues and all of that and repair them. So it repairs tissue, you get medication, and you get something for about 10 years, and then 10 years after you go back. It is not promising immortality, because I'm saying if I truck run over you, can't help it. All right? However, if You're just getting old and your knees them start creak because you play too much squash. You can get those things repaired easily. Barry, we need to talk to the people. All right? But that's what it is. And they're saying that, listen, in 20 or 30 years, they figure that if you have the right amount of money, they can extend your lifespan for maybe up to 150. 150. But that is it. And listen, Google has given them 36% of 2 billion, whatever that works out to, right? As part of the funds for this project. So they're taking it seriously. It's not like, well, listen, we're not serious about this. But all I'm saying to you is that all of these things are now in train, right? There's nanorobots, but if I stay too long on this, I'll not get to the real point of what we're here for. Let's now look. Let's look at this now in the context of productivity in Jamaica. The purpose of what I've been saying so far is to suggest that there are serious disruptions that are taking place in the world, and there's going to be a new economic order surrounding all of this disruption that is taking place. That's why I'm suggesting. It's like there was no electricity before electricity comes, and you are creating some kind of development plan, and electricity is not a part of it, if you get what I mean. What I'm suggesting here is that any kind of growth and productivity plan must take into consideration all of these changes that are taking place. You can't ignore them. And what we should do as a country is to be, as much as we possibly can, on the forefront of this. Not on the forefront of creating the technologies, because we do not have the capacity to do this. The capacity that we have is to ensure that we have the capacity to participate and to use it to have growth. Growth has been elusive in Jamaica. Labor productivity between 2000 and 2015 has reduced steadily, from 602,000 per worker to in 2015, 539,000. All sectors have shown reduction. And some of them that have not declined are not doing good themselves because they are below the national average. And the numbers that I showed you just now, was the national average. But in the early days, in the early 70s when technology came along, there was this paradox. What was happening then is that the more technology that you invested in, it seemed to show that there was an inverse relation with productivity. In other words, you're investing a lot of money in technology, but productivity is not going up. That has more or less changed, right? It is established that ICT will increase productivity. In fact, what the economists have done is to disaggregate capital, for instance, into ICT capital and non-ICT capital. So they recognize it because they're trying to measure it, all right? And there's this other factor that they have in looking at productivity, which is called total factor productivity, all right? These are just some preliminary results. One, what total factor productivity, by the way, is looking at how efficiently you use all your other assets and how innovative you are. What it shows for us is that as a country, we're not very innovative. In fact, as a region, we're not very innovative. All right? So total factor productivity is low. What we have also noted is that in Jamaica, when there was a growth in ICT capital, our GDP increased. Maybe about 3 times. So maybe not enough data points yet to say, yes, this is a definitive. But if we look at other countries, we see where that is happening. When ICT factor productivity grows, what happens is that GDP also grows. So, if we establish that there is a correlation between ICT capital growth, right, and GDP growth, the next question then is, how do we enable the use of ICT as part of our growth strategy? And I want to just explore here for a little bit the enabling environment that is here and ready for that to happen. Jamaica is going through what is called a demographic transition, in which for the first time in 100 years, we have more persons in the working age community than ever before. What it means is this, is that there's been a reduction in births, so that sector between 0 and 14, 15 has reduced. The older category has increased, but it's also at a decreasing rate. So what you have is this large number of persons of working age who can therefore help to increase productivity, can help to produce increase productivity. So we have a window here of about 15, 20 years, maybe 30 years. Because after that, what you're going to have happening is that you're going to have more people in the older age group who you're going to need to have on pension. And our pension system is not too good. All right? Our pension system is not too good. There are too many people who are not on pension because they are, the jobs that they are having are not jobs in which you pay taxes or pay pension or anything like that. All right? So we have to use this period in order to try and facilitate growth. The policy focus, therefore, should be on improvements in formal education output, managing the educational system to build social capital, improving social mobility, and forging social cohesion. That's what is being recommended here as it relates to this enabling environment associated with demographics. All right? The other thing that we need to look at is ICT infrastructure. What we're saying here is that persons need to be able to have access to ICT. What the data suggests is that there's a 10%, when there's a 10% increase in broadband penetration, what it does is to increase GDP between 0.3 and 1.4%. We're looking for 4 and 5, right? And what we're saying is that this is a means of increasing GDP. We have seen it done in other countries. US and EU has done this, and they have had greater GDP growth associated with improvements in ICT penetration. Professorial said this earlier about the single ICT space. What I'm recommending is that we move with alacrity, using Tony's word, towards creating a single ICT space in the Caribbean. We must be able to move around in the Caribbean, and we move seamlessly. And I say this in this context. When you take the 15 CARIFORUM countries and put them all together, including 80, which is about 10 of the 17 million, because we're about 17 million, and 80 is about 10, right? So 80 is a huge part of it. When you put us all together, we fit in Guatemala nicely. Just in Guatemala nicely. I'm suggesting here very strongly that we look seriously on creating a single ICT space, not just to talk about it. So I'm asking the ambassador to speak to his government, because it is important that we do this. It's important that we look at how do we grow size. All right? We must scale up. If we continue to be just small companies, and I'm going to come back to this, we're not going to grow as a people. We're going to remain informal. We're not going to pay any taxes. We're not going to have any health care for the people who are in these informal things. We are not going to have persons who can therefore get any pension. If you go now to the States and you're going through immigration, it's not people they are dealing with you anymore. All right, it's not people dealing with you. Is machine dealing with you? Right? And I'm saying that these changes are taking place. If you notice how they're building houses now, they're not taking any block, any 6-inch and 4-inch block. Cast up frame up a place, cast it. So the people who normally do these other kind of work that there no more. So all I'm saying here is that, listen, we have to take education very seriously. But here's the problem with how we deal with education now. We do not like creativity. We do not reward creativity. We reward what is right. This is the answer that you're supposed to get. All right, we need to move away from that. We need to reward creativity. We need to stop insisting that people must be able to recall. Lend me your phone, please. If I want to recall anything,
I can put it on there.
all right, if I'm going to my doctor and she wants to write a prescription and she goes online, type in the generic name, find what she wants, and she's not writing the prescription anymore, no. Because she click on it,
Send to the pharmacy.
and it can either go to the pharmacy straight, or it goes on the piece of paper that I want. So if we're not teaching application, ladies and gentlemen, and some of my colleagues, all right, we are wasting our time with our students. Your students are not engaged if you do not engage their minds. All right? And the approach that we take, even in examining our students and all that, needs to change because the paradigm has changed. All right? The paradigm has seriously changed. The current paradigm is one in which if you needed something, you needed to go in the library and ask for number and know which shelf the book is on and all of that. Nobody's doing that no more. So it is important that we learn how to foster innovation. And I want to say, I just want to push in a little plug here. I didn't pass common entrance. In fact, I didn't go to high school, at least at first. I went to Tarrant Junior Secondary School. All right? And there's one Pat Eves who is sitting down here who taught me. All right? And although the society thought that we wouldn't do well, and it's not just me, I'm just representing, we all did well. All right? We all did well. And I want to just plug in one other thing here, because this is supposed to be kind of autobiographical in nature. So I'm coming back to this, all right? I was talking to my sister the other day, and I told her about this, and she started to cry. And she said, boy, Paul, from pit toilet to professor. Because we, and my brothers and sisters are here, we grew up poor. Sorry, we didn't grow up poor. We never had no money. Because we never really grew up poor. We just never had no money. All right? And what we had, and it really doesn't matter your background, you know, it really matters what values that you have and what values your parents inculcate in you from birth. So even though we never have no money, we couldn't beg, because that was out of the question. All right, we couldn't steal. I mean, if we came home with anything and we never had no money to get it, which we didn't have, we had to carry it back because it was known that we didn't have it. So how did you get this? Huh? But you had to carry it back next week and you couldn't come back with it. Alright? That was it. I just mentioned one other thing because this was in the late 60s and what have you. And in those days, shopping only took place with certain people on a Sunday. Some of you can relate to this. Right? Because shop never used to open on a Sunday. Alright? Is the shoemaker, the helper, and so on, whose they would open shop for. So all this Sunday shopping in which, I'm going to Mega Mart on a Sunday and all those things wasn't the case. If you went on a Sunday, you knew what you were. And everybody else knew what you were. And listen, we wore all those things very proudly. Alright? We wore all those things very, very proudly. I remember I couldn't go to school on a Friday because it was 3 of us and there was only money for 2. And the youngest one is the one that had to stay on because, you had to make choices. Alright? And then there were the days in which you couldn't go to school if your sister was not working in the canteen, because if she's not working in the canteen, there's no lunch. Alright? And the way it's going is that you have to wait until everybody else eat lunch, and if there was anything left back, right, you'd be able to get lunch. And by 11:30 when bell ringing, I used to be very, very hungry. Alright? And I used to wait at the step. And if my sister was here, she'd maybe break out in tears. But I used to wait down at the step at Harvard Street Primary School with my hand on my head. Because that didn't notice that at all. And then we have to wait until everybody finished there about 12:30, and then you get ball of slush, as they used to call it. Alright? Whatever was left. But again, guys, as far as we were concerned, as it related to education, we made the best as it was, and we were never sorry for ourselves. Alright? Bottom line, though, is this, that we must be far more innovative in our educational system. And that's why I'm spending so much time on this, because listen, let me tell you this. Let me tell you what I've learned as an educator. If I teach Mercedes doing foolishness, it is going to have a multiplier effect throughout the community, through the society. Because you're going to take it as gospel, because Professor Golding are through this, and it must be right. And then you go teach everybody else the same foolishness, and before you know it, and that goes for anything else that we're doing. And when I say teachers here now, I'm not necessarily talking about classroom teaching. I'm talking about any kind of teaching. If you're teaching them sports, anything at all, teachers, listen, invest the money there. 2 other things that I need to talk about: digital inclusion. Dr. Myers mentioned about my association with the deaf community. We must ensure that our policies includes and we take specific attention, pay specific attention to persons who do not have a voice. All right? We must look out for them. The students that I've worked with, and myself included, the work that we have done with the deaf community is the most satisfying work ever. I do not need to put drag or anything like that to help the deaf community. When the students are working with them, they're learning so much because there is another culture within our culture that we didn't know about, and we start learning. And that's the beauty of this world, is that there are so many different cultures. Because if not, the world gets very boring. Because all of us are the same. So what I'm suggesting here is that growth without inclusivity, not just for persons who don't have a voice, but everybody else, it is going to cause wealth distribution which is skewed, and you are going to have chaos. All right? We also need to look at improving technology in certain sectors. Agriculture, extremely poor as it relates to productivity. construction, wholesale and retail, hotels and restaurants, real estate. All these are sectors which are below the national average as it relates to productivity. And again, let me say this, guys. We must also take into consideration what is happening in the Caribbean as it relates to some priority areas that the Caribbean has mentioned. And this is coming out of CARICOM, cultural activities. I just want to just say one thing about cultural. We tend to look at these areas in a way in which we figure that, listen, these are not important areas. You can start an entire industry around our culture, you know. And, all right? And when I talk about an industry, I'm talking about all other sectors supporting it. All right? When you look at English football, for instance, it's an entire ecosystem. That's the word I'm looking for. Because the people who did it feel and make sure that you can run and slide on your knees and whatever. You try that here. All right? Are part of this ecosystem, right? And all of the other things that surrounds it. And what it does is to create wealth. I also want to say this, guys, and I may be criticized for this. We need to scale our companies. This fascination with micro, small, and medium-sized enterprise has its place. But if these businesses are not growing, they're not helping nobody. All right? These businesses need to grow so that they migrate into bigger companies and new small companies come with innovation and what have you. But if your company remains micro, small, and medium-sized forever, what is happening? We're not growing that way. And what I'm suggesting is that technology should be infused in all of these things. And we must look at ourselves regionally. As Jamaicans, we ought not to be looking at 144 square miles. We must be looking beyond that and looking regionally for growth and to create economies at scale. If not, there will be no economies at scale, and it means that you will remain small. The role that government must play in this, especially MSTEM, must be to create the vision for this change. They can encourage innovation by using procurement, which they're already doing, to drive innovation, in which what they're saying is that, listen, if you're a more innovative company, we're likely to give you preferential treatment in terms of getting into government procurement. It may sound like, well, boy, what you're doing is doing preferential treatment. But if you must be strategic, and when you're strategic, you are going to look at some things over other things. Other than that, you have no notion as to what you want to do and what you want to become. I want to conclude that by saying this. One, I have mentioned about our poor growth. Two, I've mentioned about what are some of the enabling things that are happening in Jamaica which can spur growth. I also want to mention that we are a high crime country, which we all know. But there are some important positives that are happening in this country that we also must look at and not to concentrate just on the negatives. I'm looking at Kenya's election the other day, and I'm saying, but hold on, this is what used to happen in Jamaica. Day after election, you can't come on road. You better listen to news. In fact, day of election, you just go vote and go home. And then day after election, what is going to happen is that there's going to be war. This is what we see happening in Kenya, and we're saying, well, okay, we have become a little bit more mature because we changed government as long as very quickly now if you're not doing what we want you to do. And it is done seamlessly, all right? Improvements in our road infrastructure is significant, all right? Being able to get to Ocho in 45 minutes is no boy, all right? It means that that commerce can take place between these locations and be done quickly and efficiently by by means of road. Our presence internationally is growing. And let me tell you something about this presence internationally that's growing through sports. It has made us a more confident set of persons. People know our colors. People know our anthem. By the way, I was talking to one of my brethren the other day who was from England, and I'm saying, the English anthem, all it says, God save the Queen. Not more. That's all it says. God save the Queen. And I recall what we commented on then was how our leaders, when we were going into independence, right? The attention that they paid to our symbols. The national anthem is a wicked national anthem.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Our national pledge says before God and all mankind. Right? We were never parochial in our views. Right? We were never thinking that, well, boy, listen, God save the Queen alone. What we were saying is that, listen, we are responsible to God and the whole of mankind. Right? That's what we said in our national pledge. All right? And just to continue here, our telecommunications infrastructure is as good as there is anywhere in the world. All right? Anywhere there is in the world. I see people from Ireland. It was said that somebody from Ireland called me and was talking to me for a long time, and they want to come and interview and what have you. And what they're saying is that, so did you spell person name? Dennis O'Brien seemed to have spent more money in the Caribbean than he did in Ireland, although he's the richest man in Ireland. But our infrastructure is as good as theirs, if not better. All right? Again, the whole thing with our demographics shows that we have the opportunity to grow. I think what we must do is to accept, right, understand and deal with some of the issues that are negative. And then what we must also do is to see how do we improve on those things that is going very well for us, right, for us to grow. Everything that will happen all at once don't work that way. All right, growth takes time. Change takes time, and then all of a sudden everything happens. All right? There's this analogy that I like to make. We went to my aunt's funeral in Westmoreland a couple of years ago, and we went crab bush. And when we went to crab bush in the night, and we got all the crabs, and they decided that they were going to boil the crabs. And they started to put the crabs in cold water. And we are saying, no, so it go. You need to put the crabs in hot water. And they said, no, just learn here. So we sat and we learned. All right? And what we learned is that, listen, when you put the crab in the lukewarm water, all they do is to keep adjusting their body temperature as the water gets hotter. All right? And by the time they're boiling, they're too weak to fight. They're far too weak to fight, so there's no loose claws or anything like that in the zinc pan, because they did not get a chance to feel the water getting hot, go into that hot water immediately and start to fight. Get me? I'm saying to you that that is the way change takes place. It is gradual and then sudden. All right? There is enough happening in our society which shows that change is taking place. It is gradual, and we have to be aware of it and be patient with it, and then it will become sudden. Ladies and gentlemen, I am proffering here that ICT must be, because it is changing, what we are doing so significantly and so dramatically must be part of our growth strategy. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Good evening.